I can do.
I have.
What kind of microphone are you using?
Same one I always use.
Huh.
How's that?
Double the background noise didn't change anything.
I think the microphone's better, but the wind tunnel's increased.
Yeah.
Okay, how about this?
Oh, you know what's gonna have happen now, though?
A lot of background noise.
Any better? Better.
No background noise.
Better.
I need to give you a new URL, Mike.
Oh.
And I've made it like.
Well, mind you, if it advertises that we're live, that should be a generic one, I think.
Except it's.
But it's still not advertising that we're live.
Even though I set it to public. Did I not click the big save button? Changes saved. Right. That might do it. Although, do I need to restart the stream again? No, there we are. We're live on the channel. Whew. Fucking hell.
It's not for me. So if I go to our channel, will it tell me that we're live?
Wait. If I click the... Oh no. It's like live stream May 2020 live now, and then I click that and it just goes to the very short one that we've
49 seconds.
Fucking dicks. So I need to delete that old one from the channel. So how do I now find the video manager? Edit video. Oh, because it's only making... No, it's not making the live stuff publish. Oh, I'm fucking confused.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
Available.
Okay, can we just roll?
I think so. I think we're getting to that point.
I'll continue fiddling around, but yeah, go for it.
Right, continue fiddling around, and we'll make a start. So welcome, listeners, to maybe live news, maybe not live news, maybe some of it's live, maybe some of it isn't. We don't really know. It's all very exciting. But we can rest assured that it is June, and it is news of some description. So what have we all been up to? I can go first. It has been a crazy busy month. It's just gone so quick. Work has been crazy busy. I think I'm busier this last couple of weeks than I have ever been. School sort of reopened for some students, and then we're doing live stuff for other students, and then we're planning for September and new systems, and it's just been absolutely crazy. I had some family stuff going on that's been pretty rough, but apart from that, I got myself a new Kindle. So I had the old Kindle keyboard, the Kindle 3, and I love that thing. It was great. I like the clicky buttons on the side. And then a couple of years ago, I got a Paperwhite with the touch screen, obviously better lit screen. But I just never really got on with the touch screen. I'd be laying in bed reading, and then I'd start falling asleep, and my thumb would slide down and turn a load of pages while I was nodding off. Then I'd wake up and be like, where the fuck am I in this book? So I looked into Kindles. They do a new one with buttons on, the Kindle Oasis, but it's too big. It's square, and it starts at like $230. So I found an old model that I'd never heard of before, Kindle Voyage, which has like pressure sensors on the side. So it's pretty much like a Paperwhite, but it has these pressure sensors on the side. So you just squeeze the side and it turns the page. So I picked that up, been doing a bit of reading again, catching up with a few books. I picked up a Wii U. So I've been shopping for one, I guess. I don't know, maybe a year. I've been kind of toying with the idea of getting one. And they were like 40 quid or something, 50 quid used when I was looking. And then with the whole house move, I thought I'll just leave it till I'm in. And then about 6 months ago, maybe something like that, prices of Wii U's just went through the roof. So I'm looking around now. I wanted the black one, the 32 gig, and prices are like 140. You can see them around 100 sometimes. But I managed to buy me time and found one for 60 on an app called Spock, which you can, filter through local stuff to you and what have you. So I got it off there for 60 quid. No games, but everything else. And they even dropped it off at my house for me. So that was
That's
good.
quite a lot to pay for Mario Maker.
I've not even got Mario Maker. I had it in my hands yesterday in the shop and didn't buy it. So the reason I wanted this, because I've got the modded Wii, but that will go in the game room eventually. And so I wanted a system for the kids, because we play Mario Kart in the lounge and Wii Sports, and Millie still goes on Wii Fit and stuff. So I wanted one in the lounge, and I wanted a black one to fit in with the rest of the aesthetic of the room. So I picked one up for in the lounge, and then the modded Wii will go in the game room eventually. And I did mod it, sort of half modded it. There were different levels of modding it. I went for the middle one. So, like when you boot it up, you can use the browser to go to a website. You click a button on the website, it does some stuff. You put a few files on your SD card, but then you can run homebrew, but you've got to do that every time you reboot it. Kind of the second level is you download a free DS game, and I've got the Brain Training sort of virtual console DS game. I got that, must be years ago when it was free. And basically what it does, the mod kind of hijacks that game. So you lose access to that game, and it puts a channel on called Hacks Chi. So you boot up the Wii U, you run that game, although it's now Hacks Chi. It does a quick reboot, and then you can run your homebrew. You can run backups of Wii games from a hard drive, GameCube games from a hard drive, because the GameCube's weird, because the Wii U will spit out a GameCube disc because it's too small. Yet all the hardware and software needed to run GameCube is still in there. They just turned it off. So the hack uses an app called Nintendo, and it just undoes that software change and allows you to play GameCube games. So I did that.
Now, I have to say, I like the name of that app, Nintendo.
Nintendo.
But, dude, that is one of the frustrations of Nintendo for such a long time, is that they have, such a great, capability. Like, okay, you can play, GameCube games on it, right? Denied, even though it's right there. It's just so dumb.
Yeah, it's crazy. So Millie was asking for Simpsons Hit and Run because she loves that. So I stuck the GameCube version of that on there. If I go the next step and kind of, it's called a cold boot Hacks Chi or something like that. So it boots straight into the modded firmware. But there's a few gotchas with that. If you delete the user account that modded it, you brick your console. If you re-download the game or delete the game that you hijacked to mod it, you brick your console. So I just thought, with the kids and stuff having access to it, and I just thought it's not worth it. And for the sake of a quick reboot, I'll just do kind of the soft mod thing. So been playing that. I did pick up Mario Kart 8, which was really the main reason I wanted it. We still play Mario Kart on the Wii, and we kind of just wanted a bit of a refresh, so I picked that up. And yesterday I was in a shop in town called CEX, which is kind of, they do phones, tablets, computer stuff, and gaming stuff, all, buying and selling. And I picked up Super Mario Brothers 3D World. They had a couple of others in there, but Mario Maker was one of them. And it was pretty cheap. I think it was only a tenner, but I don't want to play it. I don't think the kids are that bothered, so I didn't bother with that. I picked up a bigger battery for the controller. The big controller with the screen only has a tiny battery in, so I picked up like a double capacity one, so it lasts twice as long when you're playing. Away from gaming, we got one of the shed. Well, we got two of the sheds, but one was wrong, so we sent it back. So there is a shed in the garden. Some stuff got emptied out the garage, so I managed to get in the garage, go through a few boxes and things. We need the other shed to make enough room in there to start doing any serious work on the game room and stuff. But I did find a box. I opened up a box, and it was stuff from the old studio, and I found a digital recorder in there that I'd not seen for a while, so I plugged it in, and there's an interview on there that we've never aired. So it's a panel from it was Revival 2014, and it was a Newsfield panel. So on there is Roger Keane, Ollie Frey, Gary Penn, and Steve. Oh, I've forgotten his last name now. But anyway, it's a Newsfield panel, so I'm going to run that after the live news. So if you're wondering in a few minutes why you're hearing a 6-year-old interview, that's why. I found it in the garage.
Well, better late than never.
Better late than never. And I mean, they're talking about the old days. These things, it's still timely. You're not missing any pertinent information. It's an old interview about old stuff. So it's a decent one to listen to. It is good. It was interesting going back listening to it. So I think that is pretty much me for the month.
Well, I haven't had a chance to do a whole lot of gaming per se, in that there hasn't been anything out. I mean, it has been a desert of gaming, for the last, I'd say 4 months or so. I've just, there's been nothing new to buy, right? The Terminator Resistance showed up. That was the last thing I got, and it was wonderful. I ran through it pretty much in every conceivable combo that you could think of, trying different approaches to the missions, all that. And it got to, pretty much the fourth time I went through it. I went through it pretty quick, because it was just, I knew the areas to avoid and all that. So I'd kind of taken the fun out of that game, I'll probably wait a year and go back and revisit it. And everything else though, like the Switch has had nothing new. When I say nothing new, okay, there's Cooking Party 12 and Horse Sparkles, Part 3, but nothing like, where's the new Mario? Where's the new Zelda? It's there's nothing, right? So same thing, Xbox. It's sitting there gathering dust, right? There's nothing. PS4, anything I cared about, I've played, right? So finally, the Last of Us 2 showed up, and I got into that. It's been kind of a slow go because, of course, nothing ever shows up like on my first day off when I have a little bit of time. It shows up at 4:30 before I leave for work at 5:30. So I've got through the intro scenes. I've got through sort of like the first mission where you go after these guys that kill somebody, and you're riding around up north, and it's I mean, so far it's kind of like the first one. I don't know if it's headed it's greatness, or if it's headed to mediocrity, or I don't know. It's still pretty early in the game, so at least it looks like there's some content there, and it's going to take a little while to play. So glad to have a new game out. I don't know what's coming out after I beat this one, because there doesn't seem to be much on the radar. Been looking at a couple pinballs. There's a few out there. The Ninja Turtles. It's a maybe. I'm just trying to. I just know, like, pinballs, I've gotten so selective about the titles. I kind of have this feeling like as soon as I go, yeah, I'll get that Ninja Turtles, like a month later they'll announce something I really actually do want. So, we'll see. But nice machines. Stern, man, they have just turned into a machine the last couple months, man. The rate at which they're cranking out new pinballs is just amazing. Well, that's probably about it for me.
What did I do this month? I ended up finishing off Metroid Prime that I'd been playing through. That was very enjoyable. Started on Boktai on the GBA. Not gone too far with that. I sort of pick it up and play it for an hour-ish every now and again. It's a bit of a juggle a lot of the time, because there's points where you need a lot of sunlight, which is being provided by a UV torch. So I have to kind of juggle holding a UV torch and a either a GBA or my DS Lite or something, and hold it in the right position to get the maximum light I need, and all while playing it, usually during a boss fight, which can be a bit of a pain in the ass. But it's quite a fun little game, that, very interesting. And the new Star Wars, kind of. Well, I suppose it's not really Rogue Squadron-y, and it's not really X-Wing. It's kind of somewhere in the middle, a bit of sort of dogfighting, space action. That trailer launched, and that got me thinking about Star Wars and the fact that I was going to play through Shadows of the Empire and sort of revisit that many years since I last played it and see if it held up, and it really probably doesn't. But I kind of got into it, and it was kind of enjoyable until I got to the train level, and that was a bit frustrating for a while. So I'd sort of stopped for now. I will go back to it, but I then, with the N64 out, started prattling about, rummaging around in my box of carts at all the sort of driving games that I picked up for 99p, and had a bit of fun with some of them. Bit of a disappointment in an Ocean published one, GT64, which I started up and it was like, oh yep, official Japan GT license. Okay, this is going strong so far. I fancy a bit of that. And the intro movie was about 5 frames per second. Well, it's not a movie, it was sort of real time, and I was kind of a bit worried about that. But I thought, well, they're doing some dynamic cameras, some bits and pieces. Maybe it's not indicative of the in-game experience. So I fired up a time trial, just me on the track, and it probably managed about 10 frames per second, which was a real shame, because it felt, handling-wise, like it was actually quite good. For a lot of N64 races don't handle terribly well. I would say it's kind of a fault of early 3D stuff, but there's a lot of stuff on the Saturn, the PlayStation, that managed to have decent handling models. And yeah, it's just it felt like it was going to be one of the good ones, but the fact that it runs so badly, it just sort of kills it, makes it too imprecise. By the time you've realised a corner's coming, the game's actually moved you about 100 yards down the road for the next frame. So that was a bit of a shame. Other than that, I started playing Need for Speed The Run, which was on sort of my PS3 pile of shame. Again, starting off, that felt very much like Cruising USA, but with a sort of a modern lick of paint, and some very, very nice, pretty effects and things going on. But the handling felt pretty bad on it, similar to Cruising USA, and the frame rate wasn't great on the PlayStation, similar again to Cruising USA. So it's kind of had a lot of parallels there. And then on a whim, I tried the PC version, and running that game at 60 FPS or even 90 FPS, as I have been doing on my fancy monitor, it's a completely different game. It actually, like, the handling's responsive, it's actually enjoyable to play, and it's actually, it got pretty bad reviews, and there are definite issues with how it's structured, and it's the way it's kind of, just these series of point-to-point races across America, and there's sort of, some of them are checkpoint races, some of them are like you've got to overtake 8 or 10 people, some of them are just head-to-head with one other guy, and it's all a bit kind of disjointed and a bit odd, but it's actually been kind of enjoyable till today, where I've got to a level which you're head-to-head against a guy in a really fast Mercedes SLS. You've basically got to go top speed all of the time as much as you can. You can't really afford to slow down, and the sort of main chunk of where you make the most ground up is at the end of the level. There's just a series of blind crests and jumps, and there's traffic oncoming and on your going your way, but very slow. But because of the blind crests, you can't really see what's coming up, and then you end up jumping, like getting loads of air and then landing into the back of cars and stuff, and it feels a lot like success is more down to a bit of a random number generator that's generating the traffic on that particular attempt. So So that's kind of been a bit frustrating today, trying to get through that. But yeah, not too bad. I've put the PS3 version in with the other piles of shit that I've got to give to Mike when I next see him, so you can have a play with that. I think that's mainly it, gaming. Apart from not sort of more modern, I've been started. What did I finish off that I was playing on PS4? Can't remember. I played Uncharted 3, which is again on the PS3 pile of shame. Although I played the PS4 remaster version, and then was just thinking, do you know what? I'm gonna just dick about and look at with all the new PS5 trailers that came out. I thought, I best actually give Horizon Zero Dawn a go, because I've been borrowing that off my mate for about 4 years, and kind of fell into it quite hard. It's kind of got a bit of a sort of a sci-fi Skyrim itch it's scratching for me. So I've not been feeling very well again these last week and a half, so it's been nice to just sort of sit back and chill out and play that. And it's surprisingly difficult at times. Like you really don't have much health when all the big robot animals are coming at you like mad bastards. But yeah, it's can be quite relaxing traipsing around what is a surprisingly massive world. So that's been quite interesting.
Nice. So for the month of June, what I've been up to? Well, I've been trying to do a little retro gaming when I can fit it in, much like my co-host, Mr. James. I've been extremely busy with work. First, I don't know about any of you guys out there, but it seems like some of us that are doing remote work from anywhere, our bosses think it's work any amount of hours that they want you to work as well. So it's just been crazy, but thankful to have a job. So there you go. What I fit in so far this month, did a little Streets of Rage, and decided to go back to Pure Solar and the Great Architects, the RPG. I had started it a couple years ago. Tried picking back up my game again, just had no clue where the hell I was. This was one of those sort of neo-retro games that was, I think, originally created to play on the Genesis, but it's a newer game, but plays on original hardware, and then they released it on, kind of everything else. So I'm playing it on the PS4. It's a fun little turn-based RPG, kind of like any of the old Final Fantasies or something like that. So see where that takes me. Hopefully I can keep playing it, because I find with a lot of those RPGs, like if you kind of forget where you're at, it's kind of hard to pick it back up. As far as newer games, started playing that Last of Us 2. I almost forgot it was coming out. I really enjoyed the first one. Been playing through the second one. I think I'm on Seattle Day 2 for those of you that are playing it as well. Looks like it's one of the highest selling games of all time, or fastest selling games for the PS4.
It sold 4 million in 2 days, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just, I think a lot of people it's a little bit of a gaming desert right now, so they were looking for something to do while, kind of stuck inside. And I was talking to my buddy that works for Activision yesterday, and he was, sort of laughing about it, saying how shitty the game is, that places won't let you return it now because so many people want to return it. And I don't know, I've enjoyed it. I get vertigo from playing some first-person shooters. Half-Life 2 I've talked about on here. The Half-Life series just was unplayable. Like I would play it for about 20 minutes, and it just makes me completely fucking nauseated. And
Mark, isn't it curious about the game industry? It's one of the few industries that will literally openly run for cover with no returns when they do a turn of a product, right? And I remember this whole thing goes back to the early 80s, right? When it was so easy to copy software, right? The idea being, somebody would buy a Commodore 64 game, go home, make a copy of the disc, bring it back, right? So, since it was at that point, kind of a perishable product, it's like buying an Apple and returning, the core, right? So they were like, yeah, well, we don't accept returns on software, right? And ever since then, it has really been the refuge of scoundrels. I mean, when you think about it, they will release like Fallout 76, right? They will release that and then just go, no returns, and not even feel a tinge of guilt over what they've done. Now, I personally, right now, I'm not a big returner. I mean, like, I know there are people, you'll see them, they'll go out and buy, 10 things, they'll return 9 every time, like every time. And it's just nuts. Like, if I, let's say I go in a store to pick something up, right? And they're like, oh, you have to take this card over to customer service or whatever. And there's some moron in front of me with literally a cart full of things they're returning. What are you doing? You couldn't even decide what you need. I don't want to go to the store in the first place, let alone go back, So I am like, if there was a case study of a customer that doesn't return things, it's me. And I was so infuriated by Fallout 76. I couldn't wait to get that thing in a box, headed back, so somebody could eat that for what they did. That was more of a retribution return. But yeah, it is extraordinary how the return no returns idea, or trying to resist returns, is their defense mechanism for making an inferior product. Now, I'm not saying that's the case with Last of Us 2. So far, so good. There's nothing in there that's got me worried. But I mean, there is some of the current tropes, right? Like, the 210-pound girls knocking out, 200-pound guys with one punch every time. There's that kind of tropes that's in everything now. But so far, so good.
I mean, for those of you who don't know, it's sort of a post-apocalyptic game where people are infected with, kind of a different take on a zombie game with bio spores or something. It's interesting, but man, for whatever reason, this game just makes me fucking sick. Like, I get bad vertigo playing it. Now, the nice thing is there's a whole lot of control options. You can adjust the motion. There's like sort of motion sickness settings, which I find curious. They must have known that this was going to happen with the people. So you can kind of pull the camera back, like reduce the dolly effect, reduce some of the zoom and the blur. But I mean, this game, you're constantly running around, like looking in every little cabinet, nook and cranny. So you're constantly just spinning the camera everywhere you go, just looking to find stuff. Man, I can play it for about half hour, 40 minutes in a clip, and then I just feel sick for about an hour afterwards. So I'm going to keep playing it. I am enjoying the game. It's fun. It has some really intense moments, but I'd be curious to know if any of the listeners also experienced that. And I've dialed everything all the way back, so just makes me nervous. I don't know if it has to do with me getting old or whatever, but this game just makes me feel fucking sick. Beyond that, I usually update you guys on my whiskey pickups. I picked up a whole lot of Dickel. George Dickel came out with a bottled and bond 13-year-old last year. It's a Tennessee whiskey that follows the Lincoln County process, which is the same thing used by Jack Daniels, where they mellow their distillate, their White Dog, over maple charcoal before barreling it. And George Dickel's sort of the B-tier brand. With some whiskeys like Macallan, the delta between the entry level and the high level is just, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands even. With Dickel, the bottom shelf stuff and the top shelf stuff, there's maybe a difference of, $15. So you can get yourself the best Dickel you want for really cheap. The Bottle and Bond won a whole slew of awards last year. They just
have you seen their new up and coming one?
Which one's that?
Double Dickel.
Well, I got the year 2 Dickel, so maybe that is the double Dickel.
Well, that's Deep Dickel.
Okay. This is the year 2 Dickel, which is an 11-year-old bottled and bond.
School, sir.
So I have the 13-year-old Dickel and the 11-year-old Dickel, and those are $35 retail, which for a bottled and bond is a really good value. And I haven't drank them a lot. Got some for a buddy. They seem to think that they have a little bit of a Flintstones vitamin quality. But if you're starting out a whiskey collection, you see the dead goal, maybe something good for a pickup for, not a huge investment. So there you go.
Well, speaking of getting old, I turned 50 this week, so that's happening. Yay. One thing I forgot to mention, gaming related, I got a Stadia when I signed up for broadband for the house. I got a free Stadia, the Pro edition, I think it was. So they give you 3 months free, the controller, the Chromecast Ultra, and then because of COVID-19, they gave us an extra month free. So those 4 months have now expired. So I cancelled it. I've played it about 4 times. So, I mean, it's cost me nothing. I did play it a little bit, but I've got a...
What did you play?
I played... what's the one where you're going down the tunnel? Kind of a rhythm-based thing. Thumper. Yeah, I got Thumper. I played a little bit of Guilt. And that was all right. I thought it would be more atmospheric than it was. Maybe it is later in the game, but I just kind of lost interest in it. And just last week they had a Trials game for free on there, so I picked that up, and I've cancelled it, but it doesn't expire till like middle of next month, so it's like the next billing cycle. So I'll have a look at the Trials game, but I won't take it up after that.
So do you lose everything when you cancel the subscription?
Well, I keep all the equipment, but I lose access to the game. So, I mean, if you connect the controller up via USB to a PC or like a RetroPie, you can use that as just a normal USB controller. And I do like the controller. It's got some good weight to it. I like the D-pad. The analog sticks feel pretty good. So it is a decent controller for RetroPie. And of course, I've got a Chromecast Ultra out of it, which is the one that's like, it's not wireless. You plug it in via Ethernet, so it's I think probably a bit more processing power in there. So I do get to keep all that.
Yeah, I think
so
what Sparkle meant is the games. So like anything while you were pro, because I've got one as well, which I'd cancelled a while ago because mine was live from day one. So even with the free COVID month, it's sort of, it's been inactive for a while. And yeah, anything that you claim under the pro thing, like the month's free pro games, you lose access to them. Anything that you've bought on the service, you could still continue to play. And they've given me £10 credit, which I was then looking at if there's anything worth buying and putting £10 towards. And it's not particularly. I mean, I might use it. It's only $3.99 anyway, but I might just use it to get Doom 64, the new remake of that, and then I'll just have that, so I don't have to be subscribed. I'll technically own it. So as long as Google haven't cancelled Stadia, then I would still have access to it.
I did have a look at Grid, but the controls for that were terrible. You just can't steer the thing.
It doesn't play. I don't think that. I mean, it won't even. For some reason, that game doesn't really stream very well for me either. Loads of everything else I've tried was kind of fine. But Grid, and well, I mean, I got my mate at Codemasters gave me it when it came out on the PC. So doesn't help that I've got like a direct comparison to then it running properly. And yeah, it's not. I mean, it's a bad game anyway, and Codemasters know it. They freely admit that it was terrible. It's just there's something wrong with a bit dodgy with the handling. I mean, some of their handling in their game's a bit Marmite anyway, but I don't know, something about it just felt a bit more off than others. The AI was quite good though. It kept with the. I mean, I really like Grid Autosport. And the structure of that, I thought that was a really good game. It just didn't do very well because it wasn't sort of mass market appeal, because it was more like the old Toka like race driver career type things. But the AI in it is like really aggressive and actually, will. They don't just stick to their line, and you sort of have to push them offline.
One of them me off.
Yeah, they're really quite clever. But yeah, I found it didn't really work on Stadia at all, which is odd.
Well,
but I played through Tomb
Raider. You get
Raider.
Samurai Showdown.
Yeah, I got that when that came. That was all right. But yeah, I mean, I used it as an excuse to finally play through the remake of Tomb Raider, or the reboot, which had been sat on my PS3 hard drive as more of my PS3 pile of shame for too long. And that was quite good. I mean, it worked fine from a Stadia technological point of view. From a point of view of as a game, it kind of had a feel that they were like playing through it. I was like, oh, I kind of see what they were doing here. They were kind of trying to reboot the Tomb Raider franchise, but they didn't have that much conviction, so they must have put a small team on it. So it's quite a low, small budget, and it's kind of, you know, it had some seeds of something interesting, but not quite the polish, certainly next to like an Uncharted or something like that. And then when I finished it and it started doing the credits, it was huge. It's like a massive team that worked on it, and I was like, well, that seems odd. Maybe they just didn't have much time perhaps, but and like some of the quick time events were bad, some of the boss fights were pretty bad, and some of the early levels like that were very linear. I was kind of I nearly didn't keep going with it, but once it opened up and there was a bit more like it, you know, you would be like, oh, I need to get over there to try and get up to that ledge to like find something, and you would then have to, how do I go about finding the route to there, and how do I climb up there and swing across here, and you know, the old sort of Tomb Raider sort of styles. So that was quite nice. Yeah.
So, question for the group then. This is my equivalent of Google. There's a few games on the Wii U that are also on the Switch, and I don't want to switch. I don't like the controls. I don't want to pay that much for a console. So I've got access to some games that were also on the Wii U. And the one I'm looking at is Breath of the Wild. So is there anything missing from the Wii U version, and is it worth, 40 odd quid or whatever it costs on the Wii U?
So my experience with it is kind of like when Twilight Princess came out on the GameCube and the Wii, and you're like, well, the Wii, I just got the Wii, I'm playing the Wii version, and then you finally see the GameCube version, you're like, fuck, it's the same game. That's kind of like, kind of the same idea.
Yeah, pretty much. I know some people that played it on the Wii U because they didn't want to get a Switch that early. I think actually I was the only one of our friends that got one at launch, and that was because I'd pre-ordered it drunk and forgotten about it. And it wasn't until I got emailed that it had shipped the day before or something, and I was like, oh well, fuck, it's coming now, isn't it? But then by then, everyone had been raving about Zelda, so I thought, fuck it, I'll stick with it, and I'm sure I'll get use out of it. And now, so I want to play Deadly Premonition 2. I'd like to in a couple of weeks' time, but I've not been near my Switch. I've been able to get near it in the last at least 3 weeks because Amber is now probably 12, 14 hours a day on Animal Crossing. She's done just gone over 600 hours on it, and so I'm basically never seeing my Switch again. But Breath of the Wild wise, from what I know, the Wii U has more severe frame rate issues than the Switch does, but not really enough to break it. I know people that have played through the entire thing on Wii U, and it's fine. And you actually get a benefit in that you get higher quality and more sound effects. For some reason, I don't know whether it was storage space constraint or what, or RAM space tweak, just the way the RAM's allocated, but the Wii U uses uncompressed audio samples, and the Switch uses compressed audio, which doesn't sound as crisp.
Okay, it's looking like a future purchase then. Thank you, Google.
Very good.
All right, we should maybe get into some news then.
We should.
Yeah, well, speaking of celebrations of birthdays, I'll kick it off with this one. Last month, we missed in May, Microsoft Solitaire turned 30 years old. Created by board intern Wes Cherry in '88, went on to be integrated as part of Windows 3.0. And they said over 1 billion people have played it in the last decade, with over 1 million hands being played daily. And then great big story broke in 2017. Wes Cherry told them that He was never paid a single cent for his programming efforts on the game, which kind of blows, but kind of not surprising, right? We have the security guard at my building. She is not stopping anybody. She's like a grandma. I sort of fantasize sometimes, like, and she's like pretty much
way easy there.
she's like a very large older lady, super nice. But I sort of fantasize that she does like, Matrix style moves if somebody like would come in to, cause problems. But she literally is playing solitaire 100% of the time. Like anytime you walk past her guard station, she's just sucked into that damn solitaire, man. So
look, something you got to remember about any security guard that doesn't have a gun on their hip, and 50% of the ones that do, all they are is a company has a cost for building insurance, and let's say it's 1.5 mil a year, and if they have a security guard on duty, meaning somebody to call, if somebody is found semi-conscious in a bathroom or something, or spot a fire so it doesn't burn the building down, that's their own utility. So let's say that contract costs $250,000 a year. Well, by having that security guard there, they saved $250,000 a year. Okay. Now, what some of these people don't understand is that's the only value of their job. They're literally there just to save the company $250,000 a year. I worked at this one facility, and I would every now and then they would call into the main operations center, and it would be this, this is Officer so and so in the command post. I'm like, who? Officer so and so in the command post. I'm like, wait, you're calling a mission ops center. What do you want? This is the guard. Oh, you're the guard in the guard shack. Why didn't you say so? I mean, you got to take the piss out of them. I mean, it is really annoying what some of that stuff goes into, but.
So there's one here, and maybe Scott knows more about it than I do, but it is an article on Pinball News, and it's P3 adding internet connectivity to pinballs. And it's a fairly long article, but it says that, they've been demonstrating this at pinball expos for a few years, so it's been around a while. Basically, it allows you to compete against online opponents, and I was wondering, if you know anything about it, can you add it to old games? Is it only new games? Can you install the system on existing pinballs?
I really don't. I took a look at it, just a cursory look, right? And the idea being, you affiliate it to your Wi-Fi, and you have this sort of system manager that you go in and set up, and I don't really see the point. I mean, look, just because if you are like, when I say I don't see the point, I don't see the point for me. Okay, there are like if you're a network, a tournament guy, right? There are people that drive to pinball tournaments. There are weekly, monthly pinball tournaments held all over the place. And if you're into that sort of stuff, right? So you go to the tournament, you compete, right? The idea of being, able to go up to your home use game, power it up, and then go in and compete in a tournament, might be very appealing, right? I'm not at all good enough. All I could ever do is get to see my score fairly far down the list. And that just holds no excitement for me. Even seeing my score fairly high up the list holds no excitement for me. I'm just not a pinball tournament guy, right? Now, if they had a repair tournament, I've said this before, where you had, say, 6 games broken, and the referee blows a whistle, and, you've got a standard toolkit, and you go in and you start working on the pinballs. And the first person to fix all 6 pinballs and get to the end of the row, I would compete in that. But I'm not a good player. I'm not going to compete in this thing at all, So I just don't really care. I mean, yeah. I know that there's those that do, and maybe I should look into it, and comment on the show just to, because it wouldn't be that hard to set up on one of my games, I'm sure, it's not for me because I'm not in that league, literally.
Yeah. So the next one is pinball again. What do you know about the TMNT? Anyone played it? Anyone seen it out there?
Looking at it, man. I mean, look, I like the Ninja Turtles games. it's one of the exceptions I make in terms of like gaming timelines. Like, so in my collection, I don't really have a whole lot of stuff past the mid 80s. But the TMNT arcade game is definitely one that that I was all about, right? And they do sort of so Stern's doing their new typical marketing screen, the good, better, best, pro, premium, limited, right? Limited adds like, some green foam trim around the speakers. It adds, green powder coating on the metals and one or two features, right? Premium to pro, from the pro to the premium, they add just enough features in to make you want it, Although I think the artwork looks much better on the base edition. The middle edition is just too pinky. It's just kind of weird. It's like this. I mean, it doesn't even have the turtles. It just has a sewer, But the base edition has some real. I've been looking at this. I've been considering this one. I don't know yet if it's a buy. I think, as I've said about pinball for a while now, it's gotten so expensive. When it went from $4,500 a machine to like easily $65 to $75 to $80 a machine, my level of scrutiny got higher. Is it worth buying or is it worth playing, right? So I think I want to see this one in person and really, really try it out to see, is it worth it, I've got this thing about, most things, right? Is I just ask myself, is this worth it? And, I've given, I think in the past, the Diet Coke example. You walk into you stop to get gas, you walk in, and what used to be, 75, 85 cents for a little 20-ounce Coke, they want $1.85, $2, $2.35. I'm like, that's not worth that. Whether or not I have the money in my pocket or my bank account, that is not worth. Like if you walk in and saw a bottle of Coke for $100, you'd never do it. You wouldn't do it, right? So there are just some things that I look at and I say, no, that's not worth at all what you're asking. And unfortunately, it went from about 75% of the pinball machines to about 99% of pinball machines just aren't worth what you're asking. And there are so many things that are. I mean, there are things like I bought a turbocharger for a motorcycle project I'm building. It was $112. That would have been $1,000 plus supercharger not so long ago, right? Model airplanes. I can now buy I bought an OV-10 Bronco, which is a twin engine turbine, close air support from the Vietnam era, kind of plane. Amazing plane, right? It's two motors, two battery packs, the aircraft, all the servos, which are the motors that move the control surfaces. I don't remember. It was like maybe $300. Man, just a few years ago, the two speed controllers just to run the motors would have cost you that much. So there are some things that have just become extraordinarily good in terms of what you get for your money. And some things in the middle of the road, like I look at, people complain about the price of like the PS4. Oh, the PS5 is going to be $489.99. I'm like, it's a freaking, top of the line gaming computer, nearly, without all the gadgets and keyboards with, monitors and the keys and shit. But, yeah, pinball, man, I got to be honest. I look at a console and I'm like, buy, done. It's a pittance for what you're getting. 3-4 years of good entertainment, powerful device like that. And then you get to keep it and all. And relative to, previous times in history, those prices have tumbled. I mean, a PS4 is not at all relatively costing what an Atari 2600 did when it came out. So, yeah, man, this is not just, Ninja Turtles directed. It's sort of my view of all the new pinball machines. Is it worth what you're asking? And some of the pricing's artificial, man. I'm not here just to beat up Stern. All the pinball manufacturers are doing it pretty much, which is actually good to say. It's healthy to say, because at one point I could say the pinball manufacturer, Stern, that was it. That was all that's left. I'm glad to see them doing well, but this sort of new pricing regime of, the mandatory good, better, best, after, Jack showed that he could build an $8,000 pinball machine, that's when the prices just soared through the roof. So, yeah, I'm going to go play Ninja Turtles at some point. I'm going to see if it's worth it. I will or won't get it, but I am glad to see just the smorgasbord of new games that are coming out. So that's my pinball rant.
Good rant.
Before we move off pinball, I just want to give a shout out to everyone. Jeff Baccarat from CNET spent his quarantine time setting up some multi-camera streaming setups when he did a stream of Willy Wonka pinball, and then he got he'd got an old funhouse and that needed restoring and some work, and he got that up and running. So then he's switched to sort of doing them all on their funhouse. So if you go and find his Twitch channel, I think there's probably the archives there. It's quite interesting to see how he set that up for multi-camera streaming, and his kid is quite young kid, gets quite into it as well, I think. So that's worth checking out.
So there was one here, which is from Gareth Hamer, and it's the number of consoles that have been sold since 1977, which is a hell of a lot. Now, it starts off saying it's in units, but then they've got a dollar sign down there, but the scale on the side of it does still say units, so I'm guessing it's number of units sold. 1.56 billion units sold since 1977. So top of the tree just is the PS2, closely followed by the DS. Then a little bit behind that is the Game Boy, then the PS4, then the original PlayStation. Look at the Wii U there, my newest console. Lowly little total down the bottom there, 13.97 million.
And that was 13.96 too many.
The lowest one to make the list is the Dreamcast. Yeah. The Saturn sold more than the Dreamcast. Wow.
But yeah.
You know what? Something else that I want to mention that I've been doing ever since we that Game & Watch that I've been on, I've been addicted to this heritage auctions thing, and I bid on a Sega Pluto. And it's now over my bid. I think it's currently at $2,500. But I've been bidding on all kinds of stuff. Like I have a current bid on some Warren Chang art. So he was a pretty famous artist, did a lot of the Atari box art. So I'm bidding on a Raiders of the Lost Ark painting right now, original illustration. They just got some really crazy stuff on there. So I don't know if you're looking for some interesting collectibles, definitely check out the heritage auctions.
I remember you saying you won something you don't remember bidding on. Did it show up?
Yeah. It was like some kind of a communist poster. Some kind of communist poster from like 1950 from it was some kind of Mao propaganda or something like that.
Not just Bernie's campaign.
Yeah, I was going to say, just those are recyclable now. I mean, and not literally recyclable. You can just hang them back up. Mike sent in one here that I find to be kind of an interesting point of view. And here I am agreeing with Sony. And it says Sony has no interest in making PS5 games compatible with PS4. And at first I thought, well, what are you talking about, right? And what it says is, while Microsoft has said, you know what, for a while, we're going to make a lot of our titles compatible with the Xbox One and the new Xbox. And Sony's saying, nah, not us. We're moving on. And I have to say I back Sony on this one. Because having crossover games that are issued on a previous console and a new console are, to me, a novelty, right? They're kind of an interesting take. Sometimes they're a pretty surprising thing, and sometimes they're shockingly bad. I mean, or expectedly bad. So, for example, Golden Axe, right? I think it's really cool that you could buy Golden Axe on the Sega Master System and the Sega, Genesis. I think that's pretty cool. In hindsight, going back and looking at them. Some of the crossover games, like we were just talking about, Twilight Princess, available on the previous and next gen. The Breath of the Wild, available on previous system and next gen. But while that's okay for one or two titles, just again in hindsight to be sort of a novelty and basis for comparison, and I'm glad they do that. For a few titles. No, overall, no. Just let the developers turn loose, go to work on new hardware, maximize it, learn the tricks, exploits, do things that look amazing. And that's where I'm at with that. So no, I don't need any manufacturer, Sony or other, to make sure that they're still supporting a console after the new console's out. It's just not something I'm interested in. I have to say, I back Sony on this.
Yeah, I remember us having this discussion before, and I forget which system it was. But if you think about it, over the history, there hasn't been too many that did it. Like the Wii did it with GameCube, the PS2 did it with PS1, the PS3 did it with, well, some versions did it with PS1 and PS2. But apart from that, really, there isn't too much over the history that is backward compatible.
Well, a lot of games that came out for the Genesis ended up getting like the weird backwards port to the Master System. There was like some shitty.
But that's a port. That's a port, not backwards compatible. Like putting the same disc or the same.
I was referring to ports as well, making a game compatible with current and next gen consoles.
Yeah, like cross generation game development, essentially. And yeah,
the Game Boy Color did it with the Game Boy. You could play original games in that, and the GBA did it. Could you play?
You could play GBA on a DS and a DS Lite.
Yeah, the DS. They put a little notch in, didn't they? So you couldn't put like a Game Boy game in it, something like that.
Yeah, it would fit. Yeah, it wouldn't fit a Game Boy, but it'd fit GBA.
Yeah,
how they shape the carts.
Well, I sent this one in last month as a little bit of a public service announcement. So a $350 anti-G 5G device is really just a 120 megabyte USB stick. So it looks like
so much.
And it looks like the Glastonbury Town Council of 5G Advisory Committee has torn this thing apart, and this company, 5G BioShield, claimed that this was some kind of, nanotechnology that would help for the prevention of the devastating effects of the non-natural electrical waves produced by 5G. They can harm all biological life forms, but they ripped this thing apart, and who knew it was just a fucking USB stick. So, interestingly enough, they've been putting up some 5G towers in my neighborhood, and a lot of people have been kind of kooky on that Nextdoor website, about. Now, look, I would not be happy because the ordinances, they allow them to put them up, like, I think so many feet away from the street. So you can wake up one morning and there's just like a 5G tower in your front yard. I'm pissed about that. Like black telephone poles here. Like I said, I won't want one in my front yard, but I'm also, not wearing a tinfoil hat and worried about, this creating some kind of like biological change in my body or something. But I think it's hilarious. The article doesn't really talk about how many of these things were actually sold. It's interesting because there's like a hologram that they put on this stick, and it's like like a Spartan warrior on a horse, and he's like spearing something. But yeah, just
a long tradition of fake products in computing. Like I saw this great article. Oh, God, the article is probably almost 20 years old. And it was when people first kind of figured out what was going on in the mid to late 90s with motherboards. And you would have, like, literally a Pentium or Pentium equivalent with, tons of chips that were utterly fake, right? It would have, a North and South Bridge chipset, basic entry level, super simple, right? And the manufacturers would provide you with whatever sticker you wanted. So, you etch a chip case and you don't put a sticker on it, right? So, you would buy all these motherboards and they would be loaded with, fake cache. It would say, it has, 32K of L2 cache. and they were just plastic shells with metal pins connected to nothingness, and many people never knew the difference. So, in that regard, I think that's pretty fraudulent, right? In this regard, I've kind of almost got a soft spot for victimizing the stupid. I don't mean, calling up elderly people and scamming them out of their pension. I mean, if you're out there running around, man, the 5G, man, it gets you with the waves. Here, buy this, sir. I am okay with that. I really am.
Speaking of more trash, I always buy wacky shit on Kickstarter. And I backed some kind of mechanical rotisserie that you put into your oven. And you just like turn some knobs and then it goes for an hour. I thought it was kind of interesting. And I was scrolling through all the crap that I bought on Kickstarter, and I was like, I never received that sprout garden that I ordered a few years ago. So I started contacting the manufacturer. I'm like, hey, I spent $30. I never received my, my pledge. And then lo and behold, found out that the whole thing was a scam, and that the company basically knew they were going bankrupt, and then ran another Kickstarter, and then took all the money and never delivered the product. And Kickstarter has said that there's nothing they can do about it because the company declared bankruptcy. So,
well, I know a guy like this. This has happened before.
Yeah, so just be careful of stuff that you back. Make sure it's reputable. I mean, this 5G stuff, I just wonder how many people were scammed, because in here, it comes with a 25-page PDF manual, and there's a question and answer about how it works if it's not powered on. And they say the system is always on, whether powered or not. So that should send off some red
my
flags.
concerns.
Yeah. You remember a couple years ago, people were buying those those rubber band bracelets with like a piece of copper in them, and they were supposedly helping you with balance and all that stuff, and created some kind of like magnetic energy field. And there was even some pretty high profile athletes that were swearing by these things. It was just like a piece of friggin' rubber, didn't do anything, so.
Dude, I kind of almost want to get in on something like that, just come up with something like that. I mean, make just take a common, $1 memory stick, put a great label on it, good packaging, and then just retire. I mean, literally, imagine making $3 million off of memory sticks with stickers because the tinfoil hat crowd. You know what? I'm gonna make a memory stick that prevents global warming. Plug this into your computer and prevent global warming. And I'm gonna start going down to all these. Remember when SoCal used to role play his but he meant them Kickstarters. I wonder if I made up these things and went down to college campuses and things and just started hawking them around and selling them. I bet you I could make some serious cash.
Well, you might not be on a college campus this upcoming school year, but yeah, you probably.
You never know.
You should make a USB stick that creates an invisible barrier that prevents coronavirus, and you don't have to plug it in. You can just leave it in your pocket.
Tell college kids you've got a face mask that will stop the smell of alcohol on their breath coming out.
You know what? There are those. It's got an activated charcoal filter layer. Why can't I see it? It's micro thin. Micro.
Yeah, it's made out of 5G waves.
Yeah.
So I've still not watched the Sonic movie, but it's getting a sequel. So maybe I'll wait and do them back to back.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
These things, as long as they print money, just like when they said there will be no more Star Wars movies.
Bull.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't want a paycheck.
We've
I
passed
don't
the
want
point of them being too
$1 million.
many. Why stop now?
Yeah.
Speaking of Sega, Gareth Hamer had sent in one called Sega Tease, which was a link to it was a Japanese journalist that had come out and saying Sega's big announcement that they'd announced is going to be on a console launch level scale. And they did announce something earlier that week that was kind of interesting, which we'll come to. But then the actual big announcement just turned out to be their plan to use all of their arcade games sat in arcades in Japan not doing anything. They're going to use the hardware to stream, basically I think presumably the same games out to then people at home and turn arcades that aren't being used into data centers, which, I don't know, might work in Japan, I guess, but I suppose it's better than them sat doing nothing and mining Bitcoin or anything like that, which wouldn't actually make them any money these days. But then the actual other thing, which I think Spinal sent in, probably some others I'd imagine, was the couple of days before that, they announced a Gamegear Mini. And to start with, that seemed quite interesting until you looked into it. And there's 4 different colours, which also seemed quite interesting. But then there's 4 different games on each one, 16 games in total, so not one device has all the games. So if you want all of them, you'd have to buy, not all the games, you'd have to buy all of the units. And the screen is smaller than a Game Boy Micro, so that means the whole unit is going to be pretty much unplayable and is more of a keychain novelty than an actual mini Game Gear. So I don't know what you guys think, but this seems like a massive wasted opportunity, because it wouldn't have been much more costly to them and to the end user to have made the hardware slightly bigger and actually playable and market it, and you could easily put all 16 games on one, still launch all the different colours. People will still buy all the different colours and collect them all because they're idiots. And yeah, they could have made an actual usable thing and beaten, people have been wanting a Game Boy Mini for years from Nintendo. Sega could have beaten them to it. I mean, obviously we've had At Games and Blaze have done Master System handhelds, but not, we've not really had one with sort of hopefully decent emulation and whatnot. So I don't know what you guys thought about that, but I thought it was a massive swing and a miss on Sega's part.
I think it's dumb. I think it's too small to use. It's like an 1.5 inch screen. So make it a bit bigger, and then everyone can use it without reading glasses. Put more than 4 games on it. It's putting 4 games on each seems like and is a cash grab. And then if you buy all 4 of them, I forget if there's an actual collection, or you buy all 4, you get a reduced sized screen magnifier for them. Used to be able to get the screen magnifier back in the day, which Game Boy had them, Game Gear had them. So you get all 4 colours with 16 games, and you get this screen magnifier when you buy the whole collection. It's dumb. Make one really good unit, or like you say, make all the units the same and different colours, and people will still buy them. And just, why not put all the games on, or 20?
Yeah, it's not as desirable as they think. I mean, it was just a reach too far. I like some of the miniatures. I mean, the World's Tiniest series, right? Like the little Space Invaders, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Galaxian, Galga, Miss Pac Combo, Frogger. The ones that are about 2 inches tall or so. Those are just cool. I mean, I've got all of them sitting here in the studio. I play them every now and then, but I mean, they're bright, they're colorful, they're crisp. I mean, they play at speed. It's a cool little novelty, right? But that's like a little mini arcade cabinet, man. The little handheld thing, once I own one, I'm done. Yeah, and the 4 games, cash grab, it was a novelty. I mean, I'm okay that they made it, but yeah, you make one with 20, 30 games on it, you sell it for the same price, and you would sell, I bet, more than this piecemeal bull crap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what another piece of piecemeal bullcrap that wasn't bullcrap was one sent in by Dave Lanky here. This guy, I want to get his name right, because it won't scroll the moment you need the website to work. Chris Oberth. He passed away and left behind just piles of discs. And they went through it, and they found a lost NES game, okay? So here you are with 30-plus-year-old source code. and it is a whole bunch of 5 1/4s. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling 1/4 into the time here. So it was, let's see. Oh, yeah. Apparently, the guy left behind hundreds of discs, right? And it looked like Days of Thunder might be one of those games. So somebody started going through the source code, doing the assembly, and they found quite a few things missing from it. So they started putting it together from, like most of the art was missing. It says so. They started putting it together from, various bits on different floppies, and they assembled an unreleased game. So if you want Days of Thunder to be able to play on your NES emulator or multicart or whatever, I think it might run on multicart. They don't say. Somebody will compile it into a working ROM at some point, if not already. But yeah, that's just awesome. A missing game that was found and under the craziest of circumstances. So it's a good article. It's a very long article, but very well written.
Yeah, worth a read. And there's a guy in the UK, Alex. He was one of the original hosts on Tenpence Arcade podcast, and he was in touch with Chris Oberth's family, obviously after his passing, because Chris also did the arcade game Rescue. It wasn't Rescue 911. I think it was just called Rescue, where you play a helicopter picking up people out of the sea. And he ended up buying Chris's own original arcade cab. So he's got videos on his YouTube channel. The channel is called Nintendo Arcade, and he's got like an unwrapping of the machine, and then a bit later on he's got a gameplay video of it. It looks like a pretty cool game, and he got it from the original designer.
That one also sent in by Peter Gibbs.
It was.
That looks things.
So one here from What's on My Shelf, and I'll make this non-link into a link. Oh, it is a link. I was on the wrong one. This artist laser etches his take on some world-famous game maps into wood. And these things are pretty cool. Yeah. So just like complete game maps and laser burned into wood, as the title says. So you've got things like Hyrule from Ocarina of Time. There's one of Link to the Past. And scrolling down a bit, there's a Fortnite map. Super Mario World map looks really good. That's one that I did like. Diablo, and it goes on. Harry Potter games, Pokemon games. And they look pretty big as well, because you can see the hands of the person holding it, so it gives you some idea of scale. These things are, to be hung on a wall in place of a picture. They are that big. So about $150. I think they're all the same price, just scrolling down.
I don't know, the limited edition Woodlands Hyrule one, or Woodlands, yeah, there's a Link to the Past one that's $275. But yeah, the rest look like $150. Oh, the Westeros one's quite cool as well.
Yeah, I did see that one as well. Yeah, so pretty good site.
I wonder what shipping to the UK would be like. I know some people that I'm in a birthday club with. Some of these could be quite useful.
I know someone who turns 50 this week.
I ain't buying you shit. In these difficult times, are you joking?
Thanks.
Despite the
Well,
fact
speaking of a cool site, I sent this one in that they're continuing to add to the Internet Archive, and now there's even more Sega arcade games you can play for free. Let's see, some of these new ones include some of the original Streets of Rage, Disney Aladdin. You can play Shinobi, Tetris. I just played Vampire earlier in the month. Wonder Boy, Space Harrier, and what else did they list? Excite League, which is a baseball game. Not super big into sports games, but some of those older ones are kind of fun. And then we got a later story here that I sent in as well. Let me pull that one up. That also, the Internet Archive is being sued. So, like I said, first it came for the books, and now this week a lawsuit was filed against the Association of American Publishers has forced the nonprofit Internet Archive to shut down its ebook lending program. So they're getting sued because of DRM, all kinds of problems here, blah, blah, blah. You can read the link about, the long lawsuit and indie publishers and piracy and everything else. But, will a new precedent be set? Even when I play some of these games on the Internet Archive, there's not a whole lot of usage. I mean, you can see like how many times they've been viewed and stuff like that. And, it's a couple hundred. It's not very large. So I don't think that there's like a huge usage problem here.
Well, I think it was just that they were, libraries will get books from publishers, and then, you'll get digital library apps that allow sort of a controlled checkout to one person at a time, or at least, the one I use for Sheffield Library does. And I think the Internet Archive were doing something similar with, recent ebooks. We're not talking out of print stuff. We're talking, up to date stuff. But then obviously without any kind of one person at a time checkout thing going on. It was just here it is, and download it. We're a free public service, and it was all. I think the stuff in question was a load of textbooks that they'd put up for students, so that while students are at home, and under lockdown and can't go to a library and things like that, can't access stuff, they'd released a load of modern stuff, and all the publishers got upset with them for that. That was the main catalyst of it. I don't think any of the the gaming stuff and all the. I mean, I was on there this week looking at old N64 magazine reviews of stuff and sort of doing a bit of reminiscing as I'd had that out, and sort of going through and being like, oh, how do I know how there's been modern reviews of this stuff, but how did people sort of back in the day review it with a bit, they tend to be a bit more hypey, a bit more favourable around then, I felt. So yeah, it's kind of fun to sort of go back, and I think a lot of the stuff on there is fine. Technically.
So Dave, that prompts me. That's an interesting observation you made there, and that prompts me to ask. I guess I'm going to direct this at you and Mark, because Mark has that publishing industry, print industry experience, and you have the game industry experience. To me, this has never worked ever. I can't think of a time in which somebody had an asset, like well, I say an asset. They had a online community. Think of the whole Chris Cardillo trying to take over, ColecoVision discussion groups, whatever. Whenever somebody has had, say, an Internet Archive of, say, old games, right, or old gaming manuals or books or whatever. I cannot think of one time, and the argument is, people, they sue to take it over so they can monetize it, right? I can't think of an example of when that worked. Like, where literally somebody, like, say, the Internet Archive had this archive of, games or manuals or books, whatever, that you could look at, and somebody comes along and sues, has it taken down, they take it over, and then it works and they make money. It's always, to me, seemingly a money-losing proposition, always, to go after these things. You spend the money on the lawyer, you go to court, and then you utterly gain nothing from it. What's you guys' take on that?
I think there's a bit of a, where you've got Virtual Console and eShop, Nintendo taking down ROMs of stuff, and they are trying to sell it. But I think they're different audiences anyway. They're going to sell what they're going to sell on the eShop, regardless of whether the fact that a ROM website is there or not, because all of that stuff's out there anyway.
That would have downloaded the ROM would have also bought it from your company, but now they won't because you pissed them off.
Well, yeah, and then the stuff like the reproduction manuals sites. I can't remember what the one is I use, but a lot of the time you find the Nintendo stuff there. That's completely pointless them taking that down from a monetary point of view, because they're not going to be trying to sell. They're not selling reproduction manuals or selling access to PDFs or anything. It all comes down to, I think, the fact that if you aren't being seen to chase up your trademarks and copyrights, de facto you then lose them in a situation where
Right,
you
that's a long-known
need
thing,
to sue.
but this goes beyond that. They're next level stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a legal question, a little bit of a philosophical question, and also sort of, what will brand loyalty look like in the future? And to me, it's interesting. We're still in the early days of this stuff. I mean, we're only very early on into this whole digital rights, digital realm, like older games, things like that. So what would happen if Nintendo let anyone play the original Super Mario Brothers for free? Like, what kind of brand loyalty would they create if you just, hey, you can play it for free as much as you want. You have to come to Nintendo.com, but you can play it on here for free. Anything you want. You can download a ROM. You have to give us your email. I think that it would be interesting to see what that would do. Now, I don't know, copyright law very well. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what that would do. But I think the amount of brand equity that they would create with their fan base if they did something like that would be massive.
I have said that. Why not do the obvious thing? To me, okay, Nintendo has IT infrastructure. Okay, they have to. They have a staff that does nothing but curate, manage their website. Okay, they could in-house easily put up a virtual NES that you could click on and play games. I mean, let's face it, it's not the same experience as buying hardware. Just for the novelty factor, just for the nostalgia, and for the cool accessibility, nobody would have been dissuaded from buying one of those NES Minis because Nintendo had an online emulator, right? And if Nintendo had an online emulator that really played well, it would generate massive, goodwill, and it would be, I don't know, man. It to me is such an obvious thing that's never done. Yet, they'll spend more money to go after some schmuck posting manuals that he scanned. You know what? If we have a lawyer in our audience, and I bet we do, send us an email at news@retrogamingroundup.com, and we will read your comments. And beyond that, we'll even have you on if you want to come on for a discussion. I'm definitely curious. Explain this to me, how it makes. I get the legal argument. You have to protect your IP. I don't want to even hear that from you. I want to go beyond that. I want to go into the deep dive of how, just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing. What is the economic sense behind those decisions? Because to me, it doesn't make sense.
All right, I've got a winning idea for Nintendo here. They've got the Universal Studios Super Nintendo Land that's been delayed launch because of coronavirus, but they need to, they've made some changes supposedly. They're get ready to open it up. You might have some of the public not too sure about going to a place like that at the moment. So what they need to do, going back to Sparklepus's idea of sticking Mario Brothers playable for free on a website, do that. Code into it something that if you get to a certain level, complete the game perhaps, or even just get a certain amount of coins in a certain amount of time. There's easy ways they can track that stuff. And then if someone reaches a target, they get 10% off. A ticket booking to go to the park, and so they get loads of people going there because of the free way to play Mario Bros. Plus, there's a bit of interesting competition there, and you get something back from it. I think that would be a fantastic idea for them.
It's a great idea. My aunt plays all kinds of Vegas games that she earns like coupons and points at casinos and stuff. So she plays at home in Pennsylvania, and then when she goes out to Vegas, she cashes in this, virtual currency that she wins from playing these games for, $10 off hot dog coupons and things like that. So there's already people doing this in the space, and I think that would be fantastic. I mean, rather than have the Internet Archive be your archive, create your own Nintendo Archive. What would that look like? Sega has such a great backlog of stuff, and I just don't understand the reluctance to put this stuff out in a way that creates brand loyalty. I get it, like there's a lot of bean counters and lawyers involved, and I'm sure that they're all going to say, well, it's not really, it's hard to quantify the value of when you do stuff like this, right? So it's not as easy as collecting money.
I just picture some red-faced lawyer with, the white shirt collar around his neck that's stretched to its limit, and he's just sitting there in a meeting. But if we let those games out there on the site, people could just keep them. And I have a feeling that whoever's making these decisions isn't a gamer and isn't connected to it. I mean, it's funny when you get inside some of these companies, any company, your favorite car company, your favorite video game company, just how unconnected some of those people are. It's just a job. The HR lady at Nintendo, I'm sure, just shoves paper and doesn't care. I don't know, man. But here's an interesting article sent in by Gareth Hamer. And it says if you bought a CRT, you might still be owed some pennies. Now, this to me is just another one of those cash grabs. So more or less, here we are 13 years after a lawsuit was filed in California over price fixing on CRTs. So allegedly, between 1995 and 2007, companies that built CRTs engaged in price fixing to artificially inflate the price of CRTs. Yeah, I believe it. And I mean, it happens a lot. Many companies have been caught in that. At the end of the day, there's going to be a couple lawyers that get really, really rich off of this, or at least a big pile of cash, a $513 million settlement package, of which they'll probably dole out $212 million in 38-cent checks to anybody who goes to their website, and the rest of it they're going nuts with. That's their own money. So
if you're a red-faced lawyer that's part of the CRT lawsuit making millions of dollars, please write in, or we would be happy to interview you.
Yeah, why not? Oh, and it's more legal shenanigans.
I've never bought a CRT brand new.
It's our old friends. It's our old friends at Atari. Atari a no-show in court for the VCS lawsuit. So, submitted by Ken Carlson. Looks like Rob Wyatt's filed for a default judgment since Atari couldn't even bother to respond to their court summons. So, Rob Wyatt, one of the guys that was one of the hardware guys, these hardware guys. Here in the register, it says, not just as VCS consoles MIA, Atari's a no-show in court too. Reborn Biz ignores hardware architect's lawsuit over unpaid wages. So basically, this guy did a shit ton of development work for this console, and then Atari just, I don't know, maybe stopped sending them emails, stopped including them on phone calls. Maybe Atari even called him up and said, "Huh? What? Do you know hardware?" And if Rob Wyatt were to throat punch Atari, I wouldn't be too upset with Rob. I get it. Sometimes those things happen. So, he sued. Atari didn't even show up in court. I think at this point, the Atari VCS is just not going to happen. I wonder, there'll be probably, you know what? I'm going to make a very unfortunate prediction. At some point in the next, I'll say 10 years. 10 years from now, we're going to see an article that somebody got a hold of the 6 shells from the Atari VCS and donated them to Joe, John, and Sean at the museum down in Texas, and they've been squirreled away in the back room.
Never to be seen again. One here from Dave Lanke, and it's a tweet from @Thimbleweed and we mentioned, I think last month or the month before, that they'd released not so much a sequel but like an add-on game for Thimbleweed Park. It was called Dolores, like a little mini adventure, and they've now released the source code for it, so you can go in and tool about with it and change it and do whatever the hell you want with it.
I do what I want.
Yeah, it could be interesting to learn to, look into how someone who worked on Scum games made a more modern engine for adventure game stuff. You're into that kind of side of things.
Make your own game using that engine. AD in chat says he completed it. Oh, so I ripped my microphone off my head. He completed it. It was good fun, but he couldn't work out what to do with the source code, though. Maybe you should try being a programmer for a living or something like that. It's a one-trick pony, that guy.
Right. Oh, that's cool. So, got one here from Spinal Cord, and this is just cool. It says, "Hi guys, I don't remember if this was mentioned previously or not. I don't remember it being mentioned, so we'll mention it. Here it is, just in case. This clever individual has created a Doom cart for the NES. Very interesting. So it's a link to a YouTube video. The video seems like about 15 minutes long. Yeah, it's 11 minutes long, and it's a guy who did he's got a pie set up inside a cart, right? It's kind of hard. I mean, you really need to go watch this video. That's what you need to do. And he was actually like kind of streaming video and stuff. And he showed a very pixelated video, kind of like a low bitrate sample, running on the NES, right? So he's showing like Mario 64 running around, I think. And so here he's got Doom running on a Nintendo. It's pretty cool. It's a good watch. I highly recommend it. Pretty damn amusing.
I was watching a video on YouTube the other day, and I can't remember what channel it was. I think it was probably LGR. And he does lots of retro stuff, and he was playing Doom on a digital camera. And then he used...
I saw that one, yeah.
Yeah, then he used the video out to hook it up to a screen as well, so he's using the camera as a control.
Yeah, I watched that one. The guy must have no other hobbies. He can spend unbelievable amounts of time. He's a machine kind of on the level that Willie is, of just content generation,
Yeah. So there was one here sent in by Dave Lanke and Gareth Hamer. Maybe a couple of others further down, I don't know. Evercade announced an Oliver Twins collection cartridge. So the Evercade is like a handheld console. I think it's probably got TV out as well, but it's essentially a handheld console. But they release these collections on cartridge. So you buy the cartridges for the system, and it might be a collection of, Namco arcade games or whatever. The Oliver Twins have done one, or they've done an Oliver Twins collection featuring 11 games of theirs, including 7 Dizzy games. All proceeds of it are going to charity, which is what the Oliver Twins have to do now because they don't own Dizzy anymore, so they're not allowed to make money out of it.
I don't think we've
discussed all the Dizzy games then.
I don't think we discussed the Evercade since it came out officially, and I think it'd come up in news before and pre-release. But yeah, it's kind of weird. It's a weird model because, as you say, they've got the different cartridges with different collections of games, and part of the reason why is that each set of games, there's not any emulating software OS on the hardware itself. When you buy the cartridge, it comes with the games packaged up in a bespoke emulator for it. So it sort of gets around, if they put firmware on it and then, they want to really do a collection, they might find that, one of the ROMs doesn't quite work and they've got to update the whole firmware. Instead, they're making focused sort of packages that work theoretically perfectly straight away, which is interesting. And also, they've managed to somehow get Eli's Grubby Mitts involved in it to make Pico interactive collections and whatnot. But
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I know some people have gone sort of, I think, they have the collection thing as well. They made, sort of quite fancy boxes for them, full colour, albeit apparently quite small print and a bit flimsy, sort of manuals for them inside. So they're definitely going for like the collector's side of thing as well. It's kind of a blend of SoCal and a blend of Chinese handheld sort of console.
Yeah. Funstock are pushing it really hard. Every email I get from Funstock, it's got a link to the Evercade and a link to an article on the Evercade.
Damn. Where was here it is. Yes. Okay. Next one I found here, I had it pulled up. The tab was hidden. So it's it's from Mark Steven Kaminsky. The guy says here, say it ain't so, Chuck. Oh wait, you got rid of coins in favor of swipe cards. Yeah, go and die. So more or less, Chuck E. Cheese is, and it's they have been on death's door for a long time. They got rid of any quality arcade machines. I mean, Chuck E. Cheese to me was dead 20 years ago. I'm surprised. Every time I see one, I'm like, they're still there, because about 20 years ago, I went into one and they had some of the lowest grade games. There was none of the current mega titles, nothing that would have been, a great game. There was no pinballs. It was really just some bottom barrel, like they had one of the ICE, I forget the name of it. Basically, it's a bear on a rope under an apple tree, and you turn the steering wheel to move the bear back and forth. And that was their premier title in the whole damn place. I mean, I've been in the arcade collecting game for 30-something years now, and I don't know where you find games that bad. It was just horrible redemption shit. So apparently,
I have seen the Terminator game.
I haven't seen it anywhere in DC, Maryland, Virginia, PA, New York, Vegas, anywhere. If you've seen it, great. But most of the locations do not have quality games. And I've been into one. Terrible.
They used to have a couple fighters back in like mid 2000s. But yeah, like more often than not, they've turned into really crappy redemption games. I mean, they have like the big wheel. What is that? Big bass wheel or whatever. And some of the better skee ball games, but yeah, they even for a while in the mid 2000s still had like you could find the occasional Pac-Man machine in one that was like a Pac-Man Galaga collection, or some crappy Data East pinball machine. Usually not working, but at least they had it.
Well, that helps. I remember going in and seeing literally 12 Pac-Man machines side by side. They had, and those were hit titles at the time. So yeah, they made the news there a bunch when people are saying, oh, if you order from Zibbazoni's wings and
Squallies.
Yeah, something like that. It's like, you're getting Chuck E. Cheese. It's like, we talked about that. It's like, yeah, okay, who cares? How's that news? They're selling wings and pizza, whatever. But I don't see how the hell they're still alive. I really don't.
Ever since they quit allowing you to smoke cigarettes in Chuck E. Cheese, it's gone downhill.
And they don't even let Crystal Methodists fight anymore.
So there's one here which was quite interesting and amusing. Mystery of the 2600 game Entombed. And so what this one's about is researchers and archivists have been digging into the source code of old 2600 games, trying to find out how the programmers got them to run with such minimal resources. And they hit a brick wall with the game, with this game. Oh, what was the game called now? I had it a minute ago. It's a maze game. Entombed. Of course, I said it a second ago. So basically, it's a maze game, but the maze is kind of procedurally generated. And as you play in the game, there's a game end algorithm that decides how to draw the next section of the maze. And so they were looking at this code, could not figure out how it worked. So they contacted one of the original programmers, Steve Sidley, but he said, well, yeah, I worked on it, but I couldn't figure out how the maze worked even back then. and apparently the engine for this thing was written by a guy he describes as a stoner who had left Atari, and he contacted him later, saying, you know, how does this part of the code work? And apparently this guy had got drunk, had got stoned, completely off his head, and that same night decided to write this assembly code for this routine. And then when he woke up the next day sober, he couldn't figure out how it worked, but he knew it worked. So nobody knows how this code actually works, apparently.
I've done that a lot of times.
Maybe you have to get stoned and figure it out.
I've done a
Dave,
load of
this falls to
coding.
you.
Done a load of coding late at night after a few beers, and you know it's all going well. I've got some, like, often ends up devolving into happy hardcore or dubstep on really loud, and you know, late into the morning, many beers, having a good time, things all working, and then a couple of days later I come back to the game and I start working on some more code, and then I'm like, oh, there's some bugs or some crashes or something's going wrong, and I start digging in, and then I start looking at the bits that I wrote when I was drunk, and it doesn't make any sense, and it shouldn't work, but it does work, and I don't know how, and I can't make any changes to that bit of code. I can just sort of bolt on bits either side of it. But it's like any time I try and go back in there and understand it and then make changes to it, I just don't get it. How did I do this? What have I done? So it's very strange.
Well, something else that you've done, you said you finished Metroid Prime, and it looks like our friends at Nintendo have launched a teaser trailer for Metroid Prime 4 coming soon.
And is it a new one, or is it they should, wasn't it? Was it 3 E3s ago they first showed they just showed a logo, I think, didn't they? And then I can't remember who was working on it. It wasn't Retro Studios who was working on it at that point. Nothing happened for a couple of years, and then they came out around last E3, like maybe after last E3, and it hadn't shown again. And they said, yeah, all right, hold our hands up. It's not going well. We're now handing it back over to Retro Studios, I think. But yeah, when I was playing it and playing it upscaled on Dolphin, I was thinking, you know, they must be gonna, they've got the Wii ones, or well, they ported the GameCube to the Wii already. There's no reason why they're not going to do a remastered trilogy for the Switch. They don't have to do any work to the textures. They can just up-res it. And do that as a promotion, you know, sort of get everyone excited for 4. So is this a new trailer? A new bit of information? Or?
Looks like they've released some more details on it as far as, you know, let's see, release date, Retro Studios, here's the release date. This is terrible news. No, can't seem to find it. But yeah, there's really, it's on its way, so we should be hyped about that, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I still never played any. I only played a little bit of the second one because I dabbled with it, but didn't want to dive in until I'd finished the first, and then I'd fell off the first originally. So obviously I finished that now. I want a bit of a break from Metroid stuff before I do that one, but I will go to that one. But I've never played. I bought Corruption when it was cheap at one point for the Wii. Never ended up playing it because obviously again I was waiting to do 1 and 2. But I'm certainly looking forward to playing them because I think taking it into 3D, you know, the whole Metroid formula into 3D and the way they did. It just worked really well, I think. Even with the weird controls.
I had played Metroid Prime 3, 1 and 3. I didn't play 2, and they were great games. I mean, I would be happy to see Prime 4. Bring it on.
Bring it on. There's a news article here sent by me. Sent it in as I watched this video. It's one of the 8-Bit Guys videos, and it's a deep dive on the Timex Sinclair 2068, the American ZX Spectrum. and he does go pretty deep. He takes it apart and he swaps the ROMs over and runs the UK ROM on the American version, and everything seems to be working. He does try a few things out, and he loads games into it, but I don't think he has cassettes, or he's no cassette deck or something, and he loads like a WAV file off his laptop into it and plays some games on it. So if you're interested in the inner workings of the American Spectrum, then check out the link, which will be in the show notes, as of course will all the others.
So there's one here, and I think this deserves just a little bit of scrutiny. The ZX Spectrum that was sold in America.
Which is the one I've just done.
Mike, funny thing, I'm reading the article with my earphone cocked back. So let me give you the American perspective on it, right? We had heard about this legendary computer, the ZX, it was like, huge overseas, and, it was a British computer, it was a big deal and all that, right? And, back then there was no YouTube. You never saw one run. You never saw the video. All you ever could see is screenshots. That's it. And I remember, hearing about this thing. Oh, it's coming to America, And I remember the thing came out, and I never saw one in the store. It dropped from discussion in 6 months. Just sort of a shame, because it seems like there were enough hardware differences and other compatibilities that it was never going to be viable or supported, because you couldn't just bring over the existing, library of software. Damn shame. But I've got my Spectrum and my Cheetah converter and all that, and I'm pleased.
Maybe you'll be pleased about this one as well. Sent in by me. Pac-Man Championship Edition is getting an NES-inspired demake on Switch. So it's using NES-style graphics. Championship Edition is an interesting game. For a long time, it's the only game I owned on Steam. I'd had a look at Steam when it came out, had a look through the store. Didn't really want to buy digital games, but then I can't remember if someone gifted me this or if I actually paid for it, or if maybe it was free. I don't know. But Championship Edition, so you get the Pac-Man maze, but it's not fully populated. There's like a trail of dots, and you follow the trail round, and as you complete them, another trail appears. So it's kind of steering you where to go. And each one, if you do it in the right order, it kind of naturally leads you on to the next bit, and you can swallow the ghosts up at the same time. It's like you get a timer on it, so I think there's like 5-minute, 8-minute, and 11-minute games, something like that, and you just get the highest score you can in that time span. So it is a cool spin on Pac-Man. I did enjoy it, and it's getting a demake for the Switch.
Huh. Let's see.
Just thinking about it.
Well, speaking of Switch, Ars Technica ran a story, and this is Nintendo ruining neighborhoods again, folks. So Nintendo has issued a cease and desist for the Switch mod chip installation service. Last month, Nintendo went to court. Shocking. They never go to court. But Connecticut-based Logistics Consulting, LLC, has been offering a Nintendo Switch SX, Core SX Lite Mod chip service. And it's $60, and it's not for the purchase of a Nintendo chip, but they will set it up with some soldering so you can put the chip on. And Nintendo's statement was Nintendo will not tolerate such badly unlawful conduct. It was filed June 12th. Let's see, there's a whole bunch of lawyers involved, and basically saying that these dudes are trying to circumvent the clause of the Digital Millennial Copyright Act. Basically, what these guys are doing is they're putting some solder on. Gentleman Van Reen, who owns the electronics hobby shop service, was saying that he's been doing modding for systems from the PlayStation 1 to the GameCube, It makes up a smaller part of his business, but basically they just do some soldering work for you, and then the actual installation of stuff is kind of up to you. Nintendo has said, "Fuck you, buddy, you can't do that shit," and taken his ass to court.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah, so my guess is Nintendo has bigger buckets of money and lawyers with showers than this fella does. So I think it's probably just, he's going to have to go away. But what do you think? You think they should be messing with this guy? Not surprised, right? Nintendo.
Utterly senseless. Utterly senseless. I mean, how many of these things are currently for sale on the shelf? What's the impact? It's just keeping hardware viable is all it is.
Yeah, I think where you get into trouble with this stuff is when you start, and the funny thing is, it's still available on their website. It says it's out of stock right now, but they haven't completely taken it down. It's when you start having a legitimate business around this stuff is when people come after you. Like I can go on my Craigslist right now and find any number of people that are, quote, selling a service of modding your Amazon Fire Stick or modding, selling you some kind of modded game system with thousands of games on them. I bought one for a buddy one time because I didn't have the time to do it. I bought him a modded Xbox with, everything on it. I think when you put up a website and, you're shipping and receiving money through legitimate methods, that's when you open yourself up to, Nintendo lawyers and shit like that. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? What's going on your side of the pond? Hello?
They're on camera.
I was muted.
I was away with the
I have no
fairies.
Switch knowledge.
Are we still on the Switch mod?
Switch modding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should Nintendo try and stop them? I mean, are people buying a Switch to get away with having to pay for games? Is that even a thing? I don't know. Modding it to play homebrew and stuff like that, is that affecting sales, or is that maybe promoting a few sales? Or is there a reason they just have to go out there and protect it?
They probably have to because of all the games that are on their system, and primarily Nintendo is the largest seller of games on Nintendo systems. But you're right. I mean, in a way, people are probably buying a Switch that wouldn't buy one because they can put pirated shit on there. So I don't know.
To a degree, I mean, yeah, I bet there was a load of DSs sold because of how prevalent and easy it was to buy R4 style cartridges for them, and that was very simple. That you'd have a lot of, and it wasn't a mod chips and stuff to a degree used to be. I was going to say it used to be quite a niche sort of set of game people that would do it, but I don't that's not necessarily true. I knew some more casual people that, I suppose it's like with cable boxes. Someone goes, I can give you a descrambling card and sort you out. It's you get people down the pub that will be like, yeah, give me 50 quid and I'll put a mod chip in, and then you can just get games off the market for £1 a time, and they see, because they're not into the games as much, they probably see that as a better value proposition. So maybe
I think a lot of the old mods as well were actual chips. You would have to do some desoldering, you'd have to take it apart. But I mean, the Wii U, it took me like 10 minutes, put some files on an SD card, go to a website, job done.
Well, yeah, a lot of it these days is software modding. I mean, I don't know if this chip. So the Wii had that fault in the boot ROM, which was how. Not the Wii, the Switch. So that was how people were hacking them early, and it was even up to the point where they did the revised model with a better battery life, where they changed the system on a chip. It wasn't like the battery was bigger, it was just they remanufactured the chips on a more efficient process. At that point, I think people were thinking they were also going to use that as an opportunity to change that boot ROM and patch that exploit, but I don't know whether they did or not. So I don't know if with the Switch Lite, and some later revisions of Switches, they have blocked that exploit, and so this chip is now required to sort of circumvent that. But I think, Sparklepus was saying, maybe they have to do it if you've got EA and Ubisoft, and you're seen as Nintendo to not be trying to block piracy, you might get big companies, big publishers going, all right, well, if you're not going to do anything about the piracy situation, we're going to stop making anything for the system, because we're going to be losing money. People are just going to be stealing our stuff, and so they'd have to do something just to keep them on side and keep them happy, I think. Going to be part of it.
Yeah, they're not just representing themselves, I guess. They've got all the third parties. So a couple of pinball ones here. One I found was a list of currently active pinball companies throughout the world. And apparently, according to this list on Pinball News, there are 13 active and 4 in development. A couple of them in the same town, of course, Stern and Jersey Jack. And then Glenn Minette sent this one in, a new pinny, as he calls it. A pinny is something else here. I don't think Glenn Minette would be interested in one of those, but this one is a game.
Well, you
working
don't
out
know.
losing weight, you never know.
I bet
You never know.
bet you if I said to him, do you want a photo of me and a pinny, he would be all over it.
He'd be all over that like a rash. So Stern are making a pin for Incendium called Heavy Metal. Looks good, and Flow looks good too. Would love to have a play and hear its soundtrack. So I will post a link to that in the show notes, and I'll stick it in chat for you as well.
Yeah, I looked at that list, and there's a lot missing from the list in terms of like legacy pinball companies. I mean, I think they obviously went within recent history. That's fair enough. But it's another frustrating thing. We were down to 1, now we come back with a resurgence, and now it's getting a little out in the weeds, like where you don't know quite what you're getting. But I tell you what has come a long damn way, and what's really interesting to me is we are now starting to see a few pinball construction sets out there, like actual. This is the controller, this is the sound card, this is the development software. It is getting more and more and more possible to build your own pin these days. And that, I think, if you can build something, like let's say I went to Mark and I said, hey, design me the board. And, I'll pay you, $1,000, design for me the artwork on the pinball, okay? And he sits down, he designs up everything to spec, and then sends me over the files. I go get them printed. I get them laminated. And I start building the playfield, right? I can buy all off-the-shelf, components. Let's say I spend $1,000 for a cabinet and, power supply and, the guts, right? I spend $1,000 on artwork development and printing. I spend another $1,000 on, say, the pop bumpers. I'm being pretty generous here. I really am. I'm giving a lot of money for this project in terms of drop targets and pop bumpers and spinners. And I built this just wonderful game, right? And I spent $3,000 to $3,500. That is now a very attractive proposition to build the game that isn't made. I know with all the maker stuff out there, I'm going to say within 5 years, we will see homebrew pinball being a very vibrant community. So that's good too. I think that's also missing from the context of what's out there is they didn't really touch, I think, on the maker aspect of pinball. But cool article list, I should say, not really.
Well, I put one in here that's does the retro scene need a revolution? And this was an article by Matt Goldberg on Collider. I just thought this was sort of an interesting take. I don't know Matt very well or at all, but he kind of goes on to complain about, does something need to change for retro gaming? So he kind of goes through and discusses how, you could read copies of the Odyssey because essentially the hardware is the same as it was centuries ago, right, on a book. And films have moved from VHS to Laserdisc to Blu-ray to